Hello students, welcome to AKS IAS. In this video lecture, we will try to understand the issues of banning Chinese products in the wake of border clashes between India and China. So, the article that we are going to discuss is Decoupling India's Manufacturing with China. Okay. In the aftermath of the confrontation between India and China in the Galwan Valley, there has been growing clamor for boycott of Chinese products in India. In the pursuit of using trade as a blunt instrument of retaliation against China, the government of India is actively considering nudging the private players to reduce their dependence on China made equipment. However, given India's dependence on Chinese manufacturing, any trade war or boycott of Chinese goods may have an adverse impact on India in the long term rather than China. So, let us look at the need for revisiting India's trade policy vis a vis China. Number one, huge trade deficit. If you look at the facts, India's imports from China in the year 2019 to 20 reached $65 billion out of the total $81 billion two-way trade between both the countries. So you see, there is a quantum increase in the imports of India from China compared to the number of exports that India is sending to China. Leveraging India's raw material. Along with importing of a lot of finished products from China, India exports several kinds of raw materials and intermediate products to China. By saving these raw materials, India can expand its manufacturing base more. So the author here states that instead of exporting the raw materials which are available in India, the India can save these raw materials so as to expand the indigenous manufacturing base of India. Deindustrialization. During dumping of cheap goods by China into India has rendered much of domestic manufacturing industries uncompetitive and thereby led to a virtual deindustrialization of many sectors. So as you all know, the goods that we receive from China are of much lesser price than the ones that we get it from India or any other country. So because of this, the affordability and accessibility of the Chinese goods, the indigenous or the Indian based industries have suffered to a great extent. They have suffered losses, and most of the industries have stopped investing into these sectors. That led to deindustrialization of many sectors in India. Next is relocation of global supply chain. Amid the COVID 19 pandemic, many multinational companies seek to move their businesses out of China. So, in this scenario, India should leverage this opportunity and attract these global supply chains to India. Next, we'll try to understand dependence of India on Chinese manufacturing. Okay, the dependence of India on Chinese manufacturing. Number one, made in China often helps make in India. India is dependent on China regarding capital goods. This includes a variety of machinery, including electrical machinery, semiconductor driven machinery, etc. Thus, the ban on Chinese imports will affect the competitiveness of the domestic manufacturing. So, indirectly, the raw materials required for domestic manufacturing in these particular sectors will be more expensive and will not be available if the Chinese imports are banned, and thus further erode the India's export competitiveness. Next, minuscule impact on China. The author states that even if India bans Chinese imports, it will have a very little impact on China's economy as a whole. India accounts for a minuscule share of China's export market compared to the global market which China has. It will have a limited impact on China. If India and China stop trading, then China would lose only 3% of its exports. that is less than 1% of its imports, while India will lose 5% of its exports, that is about 14% of its imports. Okay, next is the impact on Indian consumers. Any attempt to reduce imports from China, operationalized through tariffs or other non tariff barriers, will raise the prices for Indian consumers and thus making several products costly. The poor consumers will be the worst hit in a trade ban of this kind because they are the most price sensitive consumers. Also, without any alternative short term, it is costly to replace Chinese products with much costlier imports from Japan and Germany. So, even if India bans these Chinese products, if we import from other countries like Japan and Germany, the prices are very high and the import costs will be very high, and it will lead to further current account deficit on Indian economy. This will further increase India's total trade deficit. Next is Chinese investments in Indian startups. There is also an issue of Chinese investment in Indian startup space to contend with. Companies like Alibaba, Tencent have invested in Indian unicorns such as Zomato, Paytm, Byju's, Ola Cabs, and others. So, if we ban the Chinese goods and if government takes a decision against Chinese imports, that will impact overall economic situation and also startup scenario in India. Next is centrality of China in global markets. It's important to note that, along with being an exporter of assembled final products, China has over the years become a major consumer of final products. So, most of us think that China is only an exporter of products, but it is also a consumer of products, is what the author is trying to signify. Due to this, the shifting of supply chains out of China is not very lucrative for many multinational companies. Also, blocking trade with China, India will miss out on one of the biggest markets for its exports. So, what could be the possible steps that can be taken to deal with this situation? Number one, boost domestic manufacturing. India's strategy should be to boost manufacturing competitiveness and increase its share in world trade. In this pursuit, there is a need to create an infrastructure that raises the competitiveness of India's exports. Next, the removal of structural bottlenecks. What is this? There is a need to push through long pending legislations that aim to address the structural bottlenecks related to, especially the four L's, as the author states, that is land, labor, law, and liquidity, that continue to plague and hinder domestic competitiveness. Okay. Next is leveraging the service sector. In spite of banning Chinese imports, India should tackle trade by trade. India can lobby for a more liberalized service sector. That is, India can have a comparative advantage over China in this scenario. Next is to respond to China strategically. In spite of drawing border disputes into a trade dispute, India should reply to China strategically in such matters of strategic importance. Thus, in this context, India must increase its engagement in the South China Sea, which is a key strategic issue for China. So, that will have a long term impact on Chinese policy making. So, in conclusion, the author states that given India's dependence on Chinese manufacturing, there is a need to understand that turning a border dispute into a trade war is unlikely to solve the border dispute, and this trade war may hurt India far more than China, is what the author of this article states. So, here in this map, you can see the border or the LAC between India and China. Here is the Galwan Valley. This is Ladakh region of India, and here you can see the Pangong Lake. Okay, so now let us try to discuss a mains question on the article that we discussed. Please try to answer this question based on the discussion we had. India's trade policy response to border dispute clashes with China should flow from a careful cost benefit analysis, not be driven by knee jerk reactions. Okay, discuss. Thank you. Have a good day.